United States of America is the most richest and most powerful country in the history, but America's rise to number one was actually quite unexpected. In fact, the most North America was ignored for more than 100 years after it was discovered. Here is a map that was made right before Christopher Columbus discovered America. The Vikings said they had discovered the island on somewheres over here, but no one realized that it was actually a continent. So Columbus believed that he could find a trade route to Asia by sailing west. But actually he found some island in the Caribbean Sea. Columbus didn't find a species he was expecting, but he still believed that he was very close to India. So he called the native Indians, got some goodies, and took them back to the king and the queen of the Spain. Years later, before Columbus claimed West Indies for Spain, the Portuguese had discovered that they could reach Asia by sailing around Africa. So Spain and Portugal drew a line right down the middle of the map. They agreed that all the non-Christians' lands on one side of the line would belong to Portugal and everything on the other side would belong to the Spain. So the Portuguese sailed to the Asia and built a huge trading empire, while the Spanish got busy conquering their half of the world. All of the interesting parts of the Americas were down south, where there was lots of gold, silver, and large populations. So that's where the Spanish went. Actually, the Spanish also sent an expedition into North America in 1539, but they didn't find gold or silver, so they mostly ignored all the useless lands in the North America. The English actually sent an explorer to North America while the Spanish were still exploring the Caribbean islands. That was 16 years before the Spanish discovered Florida. But after that, the English waited almost 100 years before they tried to colonize America. England's first colony was established at Roanoke, North Carolina in 1585. But that same year, England became busy fighting war with Spain, and the Roanoke colony mysteriously disappeared. So they tried again in Jamestown, and this time it worked. The Pilgrims later arrived in Plymouth. The Pilgrims were strict Christians who outlawed things like gambling and even celebrating Christmas. Soon, more and more people were coming to America. Before long, the entire East West was covered with British colonies. Meanwhile, the French were busy claiming all the lands in the middle of the North America. And now is 1754, and it's time for a war to decide who really owned what in America. A New France had the population of about 60,000 people, so they teamed up with several Native American tribes to help them in the fighting. That's why it was called the French and Indian War. The British colonies had a population of more than 1 million people, and they also allied with some of the Native American tribes. So what do you think we won? That's right, the British defeated the French. At the same time, there was also a major war taking place in Europe. When it ended, it was time to redraw the map. Before the war ended, France gave half of the Louisiana to Spain to make sure Britain wouldn't get it. Then after the war, France was forced to give the half of the Louisiana to British. France also had to hand over the Canada to Britain. Now Britain controlled the huge amount of land in the North America. But Britain had also spent enormous amount of money in the fighting of war. And now they needed money. The colonists were not happy with the new taxes, the dismanagement, their disagreement. Their disagreement turned into a fight. The fight turned into revolution. On 4th July 1776, the Americans declared their independence from the Great Britain. And that was the beginning of the United States of America. Right? Not quite. It would take 5 more years before the Americas finally won the War of the Independence. After winning their freedom, they faced a new problem. The government they had created was a complete mess. The 13 colonies had essentially become 13 independent countries, and that were united only in the name. The new nation was failing, and it was failing fast. So the founding fathers wrote a new constitution and created an entire new federal government that actually worked. The new constitution officially came into effect after 9 states had ratified it. Then in 1789, George Washington was elected as the first ever president of the United States of America. At that time, the United States was only this big, while all the land further west belonged to the Spain. So how did America become so much larger? Well, what in France, a man named Napoleon seized power and began conquering Europe. Napoleon also wanted to build a French empire in North America. So he made a deal with Spain that would return to Louisiana to France, but the Americans depended on the Mississippi River to transport the goods. They feared what Napoleon might do if he controlled such an important waterway. So United States asked France if it could buy New Orleans. You know my plans for building a great empire in North America, but now I must invade Britain. We could build our empire in America after we defeat the Britain. But if the America discovers our plans for the North America, they may not support Britain, and then that could be fatal. However, if we sell Louisiana to the Americans, then they will become our friends and Britain will stand alone. It would be foolish to sell the largest territory besides the Americas only went New Orleans. Enough, I have made up the mind, and we will sell it all. And so America brought a Louisiana for $15 million. With a single purchase, the United States had doubled in size. Louisiana Purchase came at the perfect time because America's population was also almost doubling every 20 years, and the average American family had 7 children, and all those children needed somewhere to live. So thousands of Americans moved west, where there was a plenty of unclaimed land. In 1819, America brought Florida from Spain and agreed that this line would become the border between the United States and the New Spain. Just 2 years later, Mexico won its independence from the Spain, and America suddenly had a new neighbor. The northern territories of the Mexico were separately populated and difficult to control. So the Mexican government invaded America to settle in the Texas. These settlers quickly outnumbered the Mexicans. Before long, the Texas broke away from the Mexico and created their own independence republic. In 1845, the United States changed its mind and allowed Republic of Texas to join the Union. Disputes over the Texas border soon led to a war with the Mexico. At the end of the war, the United States paid Mexico $15 million and took the northern territories that President Polk wanted. Just 5 years later, the United States brought another piece of the land from Mexico for $10 million. Meanwhile, the British agreed to let the Americans have all of the Oregon's territory and below this line, as long as Britain kept everything above it. In just 50 years, thanks to a great deal of the luck and one brutal war with the Mexico, America now stretched from Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. And now there was nowhere to let it expand, unless everything was going great. Right after the Americas acquired California, news spread that gold had been discovered there. Thousands upon thousands of people rushed to California, helping to strike it rich. Up in the Oregon Territory there was plenty of the free farmland. America was thriving. There was peace on every border. But inside the country, one enormous problem remained: slavery. In the northern states, slavery was illegal, and many people considered it to be a terrible evil that needed to be stopped. In the South, however, slavery was an important part of the economy. Americans had been arguing about slavery for decades, but everything reached a breaking point when Abraham Lincoln was elected as president in 1860. Many people in the South believed that Lincoln would abolish slavery. So most of the slave states separated from the United States and created their own country. This led to a massive civil war. A huge number of people died. The North won, the slaves were freed, and the United States was united once again. Now, America had gained another huge piece of land. Now, it is only needed a few tropical islands. America's policy of avoiding conflicts with the other nations was about to be tested. Because something was happening in the Cuba, it was not a coffee. Cuba was fighting a war for independence. Almost all of the Spain's other colonies had already gained independence after the American and French revolutions. But Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Philippines was still Spanish colonies. The Cuban War of the Independence was constantly appearing in the Americans' newspaper. Most Americans supported the Cuban Revolution. Then, in 1898, the American battleship sank after a mysterious explosion. The United States blamed Spain and demanded that Spain leave Cuba. Spain refused, and Spain declared war on the United States. The United States quickly defeated Spain and captured Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. This effectively ended what remained of the Spain's empire that Christopher Columbus had started centuries earlier. During the Spanish-American War, the United States also annexed Hawaii, which was becoming an important naval base. After the war, the American president was assassinated, and the young and energetic Theodore Roosevelt expected became the president. While Roosevelt was the president, he built up the second largest navy in the world and used his powerful navy to influence global politics. The Americans completed construction of the Panama Canal in 1914. The canal allowed the powerful U.S. Navy to quickly move between the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. America had become a world power. And at the same time, World War I has just begun. And if you want more videos like this, so please subscribe this channel. And to be sure to watch the next video, right? If you want to learn more about the Americans' history, then leave a comment. Please drop your comments also.